Good morning, Ms. Childs.
Good morning.
I want to draw your attention to April of 2023. Were you living in Hillsborough County?
I was.
Okay. And did you live in an apartment complex or a single-family home? Where were you?
I lived in an apartment complex, Havens at Water's Edge.
Okay. And what is the closest intersection to that apartment complex?
I'm not exactly sure. I know it was off of Armenia, but I remember the landmarks that were around me.
Okay, give me 1 moment.
She had one more order to drop off. Just after 11 at night, a routine delivery to a Tampa hotel. The kind of stop she'd made 100 times. The kind thousands of drivers make every single night without a second thought. She pulled in, she parked, she reached for the bag. And that ordinary moment, that completely forgettable end to a shift, is the reason her story needs to reach every person who has ever driven for an app after dark. You may already know the outline of what happened in Tampa in April of 2023. A delivery driver, an abduction, a man eventually caught and put on trial. But the parts that actually matter, the thin thread that kept her alive, the rescue that turned into gunfire, and the stunning story this man told a jury from the witness stand, those are the pieces most people never heard. And what happened in that courtroom just days ago changes how the whole thing lands. Let's start with who she was in that moment. A woman in her early 20s, working late, doing gig delivery to make money the way millions of people now do. There is nothing unusual about her night until the very end of it, and that's exactly the point. She wasn't taking a risk. She wasn't somewhere she shouldn't have been. She was working. That's what makes this case land so hard for anyone who's ever seen the glow of a delivery app on their dashboard at midnight. According to Tampa police and the evidence later presented at trial, as she was completing that late-night delivery, a man approached her. His name was Joseph Killins. He was armed with a gun, and investigators say he used it to force her back into her own car, the vehicle that seconds earlier had just been her workplace. In an instant, the driver's seat became a trap, and she was no longer in control of where she was going. Prosecutors say Killins forced her at gunpoint to drive to an apartment complex called Ballara Lakes. Think about what that means from her side of the windshield. She's driving her own car, her own hands on the wheel, a gun on her, following the directions of a stranger to a location she's never been. Every turn taking her further from anyone who could help. What happened once they arrived is the part of this case a jury would later have to weigh, and we'll come back to it. Because the version Killins himself told under oath is almost impossible to believe. But here is the detail that everything else hinges on, the single thread that may have saved her life. During the ordeal, she was on the phone. She had been talking to her partner, and that call stayed connected into the attack. Her girlfriend was, in effect, listening. And when you're a solo driver being taken somewhere against your will, that open line is the only tether you have to the outside world. Hold on to that phone call. It becomes the hinge the entire rescue turns on. At some point, the call disconnected. To the person on the other end, silence in a moment like that isn't relief, it's alarm. And this is where the people who loved her did something that turned a private nightmare into a race against time. Her partner and her sister used the location from her phone and traced it to an apartment complex parking lot. No police escort, no plan, just family following a digital breadcrumb towards someone they were terrified was running out of time. And then the rescue went wrong in the worst possible way. When the family arrived and tried to get her out, to pull her away from the situation and escape, Killins didn't let them leave quietly. According to testimony, he opened fire on them. One of the would-be rescuers, another woman, was struck. What began as a desperate act of love became a second crime scene. Both victims ended up hospitalized. The person who came to save her nearly died doing it. Sit with that sequence for a second, because it's the emotional core of the whole case. A woman on a normal shift, a gun, a forced drive, a phone call as her only lifeline, a family tracking her in the dark, and a rescue that ended in gunshots. If the story stopped there, it would already be one of the most harrowing gig worker cases you'll ever hear. But it doesn't stop there, because the very next morning, it happened again. On the morning of April 19th, at that same apartment complex, a second woman was attacked. According to Tampa police, she was thrown to the ground, punched, and had her backpack stolen before the attacker fled on foot toward a nearby complex. Neighbors testified they heard her screaming and came running to help. 2 women, 2 mornings apart, the same location. And that second attack, as terrible as it was, is what would ultimately crack the entire case open. Because detectives working these incidents started comparing notes. The robbery investigation led them to a motel, the Tampa Inn on East Bush Boulevard, and that's where they made the arrest. The man they took into custody was Joseph Killins, then 38 years old. Investigators had connected him across both attacks, and for a moment, it looked like the danger was over and the answers would be simple. They were not simple, because Killins had no intention of admitting to any of it. Fast forward to this month, August of 2026, when the case finally went before a jury in Hillsborough County, and this is where the case stops being a 2023 crime story and becomes something far stranger. Because Joseph Killins didn't just plead not guilty, he took the witness stand himself, as the only witness his defense called, and he told the jury a completely different version of events. His claim? That the victim hadn't been kidnapped at all, that the two of them had actually been in a relationship for months, and that he'd simply arranged to meet her that night. It's a breathtaking claim, and it deserves to be examined rather than just dismissed, because that's what the jury had to do. On one side, a woman who testified that this man held her at gunpoint and forced her to perform a sex act on him, backed by a shooting, a hospitalized rescuer, and a second victim the very next day. On the other, a man insisting it was all consensual, a lover's meeting gone somehow sideways. For his story to be true, an awful lot of other evidence would have to be a coincidence, and it was that evidence that did the talking. Prosecutors argued Killins' account simply didn't match the record. An investigating sergeant testified that Killins' story actually shifted over time, that his version changed as detectives confronted him with surveillance footage and other evidence. A former coworker took the stand and testified she recognized him in video police showed her. Little by little, the physical trail and the witnesses pinned his story in place, and the "we were dating" explanation had to stretch to cover facts it couldn't hold. There's a moment from the trial that tells you everything about how his own defense was going. During the victim's testimony, Killins reportedly insisted his attorney grill her about which direction she turned while driving. Left here, right there, convinced it would expose her as a liar. His own lawyer pushed back on the record, warning that going down that road would actually open the door for the jury to see other evidence that had been kept out of the trial. In other words, the defendant was fighting to introduce the very material most likely to sink him. The judge, at another point, had already had to warn him about his behavior in blunt terms. Then came the verdict, and the speed of it is its own headline. The jury did not agonize. They did not stay out for days. By multiple accounts, they deliberated for only about 21 minutes before returning. And when they did, it was guilty on all counts: armed kidnapping, sexual battery with a firearm, attempted first-degree murder, and robbery-related charges stemming from the two attacks. A story he'd staked his freedom on, dismantled in less time than it takes to watch a sitcom. What happened next played out in front of everyone in that courtroom. As the verdicts were confirmed, Killins came apart. He began to yell, reportedly shouting that the victim was lying, and had to be physically restrained by deputies. The judge ordered him removed, and he was placed in a holding cell to watch the rest of the proceedings remotely. The composed man who'd taken the stand to sell a love story was gone. The sentence matched the gravity of it. Killins was sentenced to life in prison, life on multiple counts, handed down in part because of his status as a repeat offender, with additional years on top for the remaining charges. And that repeat offender label is not a small footnote. Reporting from the trial noted he carried a long criminal history, multiple prior felony convictions, including several for crimes involving dishonesty. This was not a man the system had never seen before, and that raises the uncomfortable question that hangs over so many of these cases. What would it have taken to stop this before that April night ever happened? So let's come back to why this case belongs in front of every delivery driver. Because the lesson here is real and it's practical, not just emotional. She did nothing wrong, but the details that mattered most to her survival were the ordinary ones. She was on a live phone call when it began, and her location could be tracked by people who loved her. That call and that location trail are, quite literally, part of why we're able to tell this story with her still here. The takeaway isn't fear, it's that the small habits, a connected call, a shared location, someone who knows your route, can become the difference between a disappearance and a rescue. It's worth saying plainly for anyone who works these apps after dark. Keep a trusted person able to see where you are. Treat a stop that feels wrong as reason enough to leave. And know that the ordinary phone in your hand can be the most important safety tool you own. None of that is a guarantee, and none of it puts the blame on a victim who was simply doing her job. But in this case, those small things bought the time that mattered, and there's an honest analytical point to sit with. On paper, the defense picked the only strategy available to it. If the physical evidence is overwhelming, reframe the encounter as consensual, and make the case about credibility instead. It's a play that occasionally works. Here it collapsed, and fast, because a consent defense can't easily explain a gunshot rescuer, a second victim the next morning, a shifting story, and independent witnesses. When a jury needs only 21 minutes, it usually means the story on the stand couldn't survive contact with the evidence. There are still threads worth thinking about. How many warning signs existed in the years before this? Whether the second victim would ever have gotten justice on her own without the first case to anchor it, and what it says that a man facing this much evidence still chose to gamble on a jury rather than take accountability. Those aren't loose ends in the crime itself. That part is settled. They're the harder questions about how someone reaches this point at all. If stories like this one matter to you, if you believe the people targeted while just trying to earn a living deserve to have their cases told carefully and their names remembered, please subscribe to this channel. A like or a share genuinely helps this reach the next driver who needs to see it, and that reach is the whole point. One last necessary note. Everything in this account comes from Tampa police statements, prosecutors, courtroom testimony, and credible reporting on the trial. Joseph Killins was tried, convicted on all counts, and sentenced to life in prison. Where testimony or allegations were described, they were presented as what witnesses and investigators stated in court. The woman at the center of this survived something almost unimaginable, and the reason her story can be told at all is that a phone stayed connected, and people who loved her refused to wait.